Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Module 4 of Introduction to Web Programming. And what we're going to cover today is some layouting tags and semantic tags. So, semantic tags with HTML5 are new, and we're going to cover some basic layouting tags like div, p, and span, right? So, let's have a look at the agenda. So, why do we need to learn these layouting and semantic tags? Now we will discuss this into two parts. First, we're going to talk about the layouting controls, find the control flow content that you're going to basically have with the div, with p, and with span. We'll understand how they were used in the previous versions of HTML, right? They're still valid now. They are not deprecated. They are still valid now, and you can still go back and use them. And the next part is going to be the semantic tags, and they are going to be compared with the layouting tags that we are having, right? So we'll talk about why do we require layouting tags. We'll also be talking about why do we require semantic tags, what's the difference between them, what's the advantage of using semantic tags if there is any, right? So that's what we'll be covering in this session. Okay. Now there are a few concepts which we'll also be talking about, okay, more on to the layouting and the semantic part. We'll not talk more on the styling part here because that we're going to cover in the CSS module. But yes, I'm going to let you know a basic kind of styling that you can do and talk about some CSS properties that you can do in, right? So let's talk about the layouting controls. Now before we do that, as you know, this recording is being brought to you by OdinSchool, which is a technology upskilling platform, and we help you to continuously acquire new skills. So stay skilled and stay ahead. Right? I'm Sumit Vijay Vajpayee. I'm having 14 years of experience in IT trainings and software development. I do deliver trainings on Mean, Mern, and Full Stack. I do deliver trainings on Angular, React, Vue, GraphQL, MongoDB, AI, and machine learning as well. Right? So that's my introduction. Now, let's see what's the agenda. So as we discussed on, we're going to talk about the layouting tags, which we also call it as control flow tags, and we'll have the discussion on div, p, and span, right? And the second half, we're going to talk about the HTML5 semantic tags as well. So let's understand why do we use these layouting tags. Now, as you see, any website that you visit, right? So let's say if I'm going to compare, so here, any website that you visit, you try to create. So if you imagine a web page, so let's say this is a blank web page that you're starting with. So this web page, you may decide to have header, you may decide to have a sidebar, you may decide to have a footer, fine with it, and you may need to have some content to be shown on the right hand side part, right? Sorry, yeah. So this is where you will try to visualize, okay, this is my content where maybe some image and some header may be going in. So that's basically the title of my website. Okay, then I may have some links, fine, which are there. That doesn't have to be in this way. It is just what we are trying to visualize. Then there may be some advertisements and all which can be shown in here, right? So that's a basic layouting that you can have. So something which you want to show as a full width onto it, and this is where your main content reside. Fine, that's your application content that's going to reside in here. Then we are going to have this as a footer. This is an application page footer where you would want some things like the copyright things that you want to put in, right? Or any information about the site creator that you want to have. Okay, so all these things can be there. So created by, fine, if at all you want to give any credits to it. So all these things can be covered in this footer part. Okay. So this title, or as we want to call it as an header, let's say, this is going to have maybe your company name. Okay. So this company name is what you want it to be firstly shown when the user visits your website. This may be your company's logo, the picture. Fine. Now yesterday we talked about the image tag. So you can go back and implement this logo by using a picture, fine, or using a simple image tag. Right? So that's how ideally we visualize our any web page to be there. Yes, there may be some changes. I'm not talking about what goes inside the main content, but if I talk about layouting of a particular page, this is how I try to visualize a web page, right? Now within this web page, if let's say I try to go back and specify, okay, I can have individual items, like I can have an image, I can have the heading going here, I can have some links, okay, some menus that you can have in, you can also add a menu in here, not a problem. And but let's say we are sticking up to the left hand side for links, and as you click on the links, you have the page being loaded all together, right? Now for having these content, okay, to be identified, let's say for example, you want to have this portion of your application, which is the main content, find this portion of your application to be bordered differently or shown or rendered differently. So maybe I'm going to use a different link altogether. So this main content, okay, that we are talking about is going to be bordered in a different way. Then I may want to show my footer in a different way, right? So that's my layouting way, how I'm going to show in. Then I can have something to be selected for the image and the header part inside it, right? I may decide the same thing for your let's say some links which are being shown here. Now every section that you see here is something which is containing your content, right? And that's what HTML was used for, as we talked about. So we have all the content to be put up into a web page, and that web page is something that's going to display the content that we try to put in, right? Now if you see, we have learned about page tags, right? So we talked about the page tags which can occur only once. So we talked about using HTML as an head tag, okay, which is again a page tag because it only occur once. HTML has two parts to it. One is the head section and second is the body section. So this body section, right, is where we are saying, okay, this is something which is going to be rendered to what we call as the client area inside your browser, right? And inside this client area that the browser is going to show, fine, I'm going to go back and have this body to contain all the contents that we are trying to put in, right? So let's say this is some heading, this is some image, this is some links and all. But if you see around, if I try to have my contents being shown into the UI in a normal way, fine. So I can have an image, I can have a header, okay, I can go back and specify some links, fine, all this team together, fine. You have the main content to be showing some content inside it. So this cannot directly happen only by using the body tag, because body is going to represent the entire client area, but it's not going to tell you where to place what content. So which content goes at what location is what not the body tag is going to tell you, right? So for that purpose, we require layouting div tags, okay, which are nothing but the flow content tags. So these flow content tags which are given to you by HTML as well, and now with HTML5, as we said, we are going to talk about it later on. But yes, these contents are provided to you by using normal HTML tags as well, fine, which you can obviously use in HTML5. So what these layouting or flow content tags are, so let's talk about it. So body can have your layouting tags in three forms. Fine, so let's talk about them. So if we talk about layouting, yes, so if you talk about layouting, I can fix a layout of my page using these tags. It's a very generalized tag that we use, and that is called as a div tag. So div, which basically implies a division. Fine. So a division of what? A division of body. Means it's a part of body, right? So it's a division of body. It means if I want my body to be divided into different parts, I ideally try to make use of div, right? We'll talk about other tags as well. So let's talk about a paragraph tag. So there is a p tag, which implies a paragraph. And as you know, paragraph basically scopes, right? Paragraph basically scopes to set of lines, right? So these the div and the p. And you also have another tag that is span. Now, why am I talking about this? Because if you try to visualize the div, p, and the span, fine, you'll be understanding the usage of it. So let's see span. So span is having again a lesser context. Now paragraph is again used as a lesser context to div, and span is used as again as a lesser context to paragraph. Now this span which we are talking about is going to basically refer to a collection of words. So not even a sentence as well, because that's what paragraph can be used for, but collection of words, or maybe even a single word. So collection of words. Let's say you want to highlight something, fine, or you want to apply some different styling to it. That's where you can make use of this span tag. So let's say set different styling. That's where you use span tag. So basically the scope of div is you try to have your body being divided into div. That's how we visualize. Then you have p, which is smaller than the div. Fine. So not smaller in case of having height and width to be there, but from an syntactical perspective, okay, you understand, okay, it's a paragraph, and paragraph can also be a part of body. So it's not wrong to have this div, p, and span directly contained inside a body tag, right? But ideally the way is, if let's say we try to visualize something, let's say if this is your body, then we try to visualize there may be three different portions of my body tag. So I can have div inside each of them. So there can be three sections, or let's say there is only one section for simplicity. So I can have this portion being marked as a div. So this can be a division of a body. Now within this div, if I want to have some collection of sentences to be marked with something, then I can use this as my p. I'll just put it here so that we have space for span. So this is your paragraph. But so this may contain some things. Now if I select only some words here and I want to highlight that, I would be using here a span tag. That's how I visualize the scope of the layouting controls, find that we are going to use. Now it's again not mandatory that you have to just use a span within a paragraph. Okay, as I said, you can use span within a body tag directly, you can use span within a div tag directly, but when you use div, p, and span, div can allow another div control to be there, because we'll talk about these block level elements. Then div can contain p, div can contain span, right? as an higher order let's say control, fine, or a tag. But p cannot contain another p, or p cannot contain div tag. It's an validation, it's a markup error. Okay, if you try to put that div into the p and try to put it into the validator, as we saw with HTML5 validator, okay, it's going to give you an error. So that's what it is. Yes, and span again cannot contain p or div tag. So you can use multiple p's inside a single div. You can even use divs within a div. That's not a problem. You can even use a span within a p. Fine, you can have multiple spans to be used inside a p. Okay, and then you have this div tag also to be used. Right? So that's how we visualize. So we have body, we have div, then we have p, and then we have span. Right? So that's how to try to visualize. So let's say if I just write it in a way that you understand. So we do have the body tag, fine. Then the body can contain div, but it can also contain p. But let's say body contains div, div contains p, and p can contain span for different styling purpose. Now, it's only not sufficient to understand that okay, div is an division of a body, fine, and p can be specifically talking about smaller sections of the div that's there. But what we can also do is we need to also understand how does this browser goes back and displays some content. So if I'm not using these tags, right, if I'm not using these tags and I'm just going back and simply having these tags being mentioned into some content directly presented to the body, Okay, how does this come in? Fine. So let's understand this, because when I'm saying this is a layouting control, or it's an uh, a control which allows you to understand what browser is going to display within the control, you also need to understand what that control does, or the tag does. When I'm saying control, I mean by an element, or I mean by the tag as well, right? So body tag by default does not do anything. It does not set anything for you. Even when you talk about div, p and span, they can be used for some purposes, for layouting purposes, and we will be seeing an example where we can use this div, p and span, right? So if you have a look at it, that's what the container tags or the layout tags mean. So the div element is quite often used as a container for other elements, right? So there can be n number of other elements that div can contain. A paragraph, which is p, always starts a new line and is usually block of text, right? So that's what a paragraph is. We'll talk about more on the paragraph as we move ahead. And a span is a generic container for a text or inline HTML. Right? So the scope we discussed on is div, p, and then span. Again, it's not wrong to write a span directly inside a body, or p inside a body. You can still do that, but you need to understand that you will not be able to use p within a p, or a div inside a paragraph, or even a span to contain paragraph or a div. And that will be a validation kind of an error. And even if you do that, some browsers do autocorrect it. Let's say if you try to go back and have and p things in here. So let's say if you try to figure out and say, okay, I want to have a paragraph, and in this paragraph I want to have a div, fine, and then you write something within it, fine, and then you have the end of div, and then you have this end of p. Now how does, sorry, this is end of p. So how does your browser understand this? Is the browser sees, okay, p is there, fine, it contains div. Oh, p cannot contain div. So some browsers end your p tag like this, fine, and then you have the div, fine, containing the content that you provided, and within this div, and then you have the end of p, which was still kept by the browser, and that's basically the error. Okay? So if you try to do that, that's what ideally happens with some of the browsers in place, okay, which should not be done. Now, as I said, it's important for you to understand this, because when I'm not using these elements, so let's go back and see an example. If I'm not using this element, then what I'll be doing. So we'll just go back to the previous slide, because we are still on to the layouting container tags. Yes. So let me open up my Visual Studio Code and have these things being placed inside the div, p, and then the span. Right. So let's create a module 4 folder, and in this module 4 I'm going to create an let's say no layout .html. So in this no layout.html, in this no layout.html, if I'm trying to create an HTML5 page where I'm going to have some content being present, right? So let me have any content that's there. So let's go back and make use of some content. So let's search for HTML5. Can be any content. I'm just going back to Wikipedia, and I would just take this, some content, anything. I'm just going to put it inside the body tag, right? It's just some content plainly pasted inside body. So if I right click and open it with live server, right, that's what the content is. Okay? So there is no styling, there is nothing onto it. Okay, so even if I'm trying to have some heading, so maybe what I want is, I want this HTML5 to be heading. So there is no formatting in place, okay, as of now, as you would see out this one, so that we have one single kind of an paragraph in there. But now what I want this entity to have some kind of block. So let's say HTML5 should be shown inside heading. Now if I do this, so this is where your display property would kick in, so we'll understand that in a moment. So if I just use an h1 tag, so I said yesterday h1 tag is something that we already used it fine for displaying some heading. H1 is the largest font size that you can get with the headings. So if I say h1 and then you say HTML5, now you see HTML5 is the heading, right? So that's formatting tag. So these are heading tags which the browser understands. Okay, I understand that HTML5 has to be shown in a larger font size with h1 tag being used in. But also what you would find if you try to see in here, along with h1 being used, you don't have any text coming after this. Now the reason behind why is this coming in the next line and not into the normal control flow. Now this is all called as control flow. Control flow basically means that your browser tries to place the content fine based on to what tag it is, meaning there is a property called as display. So we'll talk this more when we go ahead with CSS or CSS3. So this is display property that CSS provides you, and what this display does, it controls how the browser is going to have the content to be placed next. Okay. Now if I say display for this HTML5 element, which is a h1 tag, the display is by default set. So there are some properties which are by default set for some tags, and here the display property is set as block. Now what does this display property block basically mean is, if I try to go back, just delete everything. If I try to go back, right click, inspect, over the mouse over h1, that's how you will see that it is occupied the entire width of it. Okay, now how do you know it's display block? If I just zoom on the right hand side, you'll see this is what I'm doing in. Right now here by default display colon block is there, and that's the reason why h1 is blocking all the control not to be appearing on the right hand side, even if there is the size, there is some space for doing that, right? So this display property blocks it from doing it, and this is the same exact property being set for a div tag as well, right? Meaning, for example, let's say if I don't use h1 tag, right, but I want HTML5 to be there, and I want to have this from Wikipedia, the information that we are having, to be mapped in a div tag, let's say. Now within this div, I'm going to put up the end of it, and so that's how I'm going to put. So there's like a short way of formatting your document. It's Control KF, and that's how the formatting of your HTML page can be done. So if I right click and open with live server, it's already open, but I'll do that. Now you will see h1 is gone because that's what we have got rid of. But what you will see is this starts again from the next line. Now why is this? HTML5 is not written in anything else, but you are using div, and div is also a block level element, right? And because div is a block level element, fine, we need to understand that will again start from the next line. So if any element is a block level element, okay, it will not allow any of the other items to come in here, fine, even if the size is small. So let's say what I do, for your understanding purpose, what I try to do is I'll go back and apply some styling to it. Now there is a style attribute which is a global attribute that's available with all the tags that you use in HTML, right? And this style is, let's say, going to have border as, let's say, 1 pixel, fine, and solid and red in color. Now if I do this, my div, let me make it 2 for better clarity. So now my div is having the border being set as 2 pixels solid in color. So it contains this text, but what this div can also contain is, can contain other elements, because div is meant to have content elements present inside it. So I can have h1 tag present inside my div, fine. So I can go back and say h1 to have this HTML5, and because h1 also div block level element, this will come in the next line of code, right, that you see. But let's say you decide to have a other items to be marked. So I don't want everything to be in a one single line of things, but I may want to have paragraphs. Now you are thinking on having a content, the main content which is here, to be divided into some part. And as we discussed on, you can think on, now it's not wrong to have that to be in the div again. Okay, let's say if I try to say, let's say from here, the current specification is known as HTML. Okay, is what, or maybe HTML5 was released. Maybe this is a standard thing for a paragraph, let's say, and I want this to be coming from the next line. So you can surely go back and wrap this HTML5 was released in public facing and so on into a div tag. There's no one stopping onto it because div is a block level element. It can allow another block level element also to be present inside it. But now, because I'm thinking on a division of a div, I would think on a paragraph, right? So here, let me take any of these. So let's say this is what I'm figuring it out. Okay? So I can just put this or wrap it with a paragraph. And within this paragraph, if I just paste, save, now what you see is this. So you see a break, fine, here as well, which is the end of where we started off with paragraph. So this is basically start of the paragraph, and this is the entire paragraph starting from here till here. And because P is also a block level element, fine, it will not allow any other element also to become coming here, fine. So even though there is space for the content to be shown, it will not be doing it because it's also a block level element, fine. So HTML5 includes detailed processing and all, comes back into the next line of code. So that's a normal control flow that we basically talk in. So your div can control it. So if you want the elements to be appearing in a way, in a format, okay, where we are wanting it to be in a different paragraph, then we can have the divs to be divided into different paragraphs, and we can have some styling. So you can even place a styling in here. So this is called as inline styling. So I may go back and even give again the border. Let's say, for example, I want to have border again as 2 pixels, let's say dashed for that matter. Yeah, dashed for that matter, and let's have black. Okay. And also I want to set some background color. So I can say background hyphen color as, let's say, light blue. Fine. So when I do this, I can have that particular paragraph being highlighted. Right. Now, here, if we talk about from this paragraph, now even I'm saying that you can have different sections to be identified. Now, okay, I'm happy with this paragraph being said, right, and a new line getting started, okay, for a better readability. But what I want to also have is I want to have some different styling for this W3 recommendation, okay, or maybe the date is, which is kind of an important. So I can go back and make use of span for applying some styling onto this W3 recommendation. So if I just go back and search for it, so it's here. And come back in here with this content. Right. So this W3C recommendation is what I want to stand out, right? Maybe have a different background color or have something to be marked in, and that's where I'll be using a span tag. So span allows me to have maybe a collection of words to have some important things to be marked out, and that's the W3 recommendation which I select. It can be anything else that you want to have, and maybe I can have some background color of it to be set as, let's say, light coral. Right. And now you see that's something which can be kind of highlighted. So span is not a block level element. So what we learn here is div is a block level element. Fine. So this is a block level element. Body is also block level element. P is a block level element. So the display property is being set as block. But if you talk about span, the display property is set as inline. Now if you have a look, you can right click, go to inspect, for better readability, yes. And if you have a look at the span tag, Fine. By default, now you don't see as display as something, so where you can see it around, okay, you do show it for div and all, but I'm not able to see something. So what you can do is you can just search. If you're not able to see the things here directly, you can search in the computed section. So this is a second tab. You can go into computed, and here you can just search for display. Now can you see the display is inline? That's what the display is. So display for span is inline. So coming back in here, span is an inline display item. It means anything that comes after it will be in a normal control flow. It will not be in a new line. Right? That's how you make use of the block and the inline level elements. So this is how you try to understand the layouting controls, which are div, p, and span. Right? So if this div tag is what I'm trying to specify as a division of body, okay, then I try to visualize my p as smaller section of a div. I can visualize span even to have a much smaller section of your paragraph to be used. Now, for this to use, we understood, okay, that's how we'll be making use of the layouting controls, and we understood what are block level elements and what are inline elements as well. For next thing to talk about, how these tags were overused. Now, when we work with HTML, we just went ahead and had this content as we were discussing on. So what we used to do, we used to mark everything with div here, right? Means, let's say if I go back and specify, so this is the title. So what I would do, I would go back, have a div that would internally contain, yeah, so this div tag is something that will be marked with the header as an ID, and then this div tag will be what will be used to have image and the h1 tag, let's say, contain inside. Then I would have another div which would mark this portion. Fine, these two things would be there into another div, but then it has two sections. Again, I would have another div which marks this one and which marks this one as well, right? Oh, but I have a third column as well, so I would go back and have this div again marked with some kind of an ID. Okay. Then this is again a div footer. Fine. So all these items that you see were kind of implemented by using div tags, and it was kind of overused. So everywhere in the document you would just find your divs being used everywhere. Right? So it was kind of an overused entity. Okay, which can still be done. I'm not saying div is not used for containing other elements, but ideally we end up having the content being put up in div tags, and we don't understand what this content basically pinpoints to. And for that matter, HTML5 has given us semantic tags. Okay? So to avoid overuse of div tags, and we don't understand, okay, where my content is going in, because at the end of the page I may have let's say 30 divs, 40 divs, 50 divs into my page, right? And 100 divs for that matter as well, not a problem. Okay, but if I see the readability of my page, that has gone for a toss, okay, because I don't understand which div corresponds to what until unless, okay, I keep the track of what divs are going to be used in. So rather than using this divs everywhere, we just try to make use of semantic tags. So let's understand what the semantic tags are. So with HTML5, you get semantic tags. So what are semantic tags? A semantic element clearly describes its meaning to both browser as well as the developer. So they mean something into a browser, and we say that, okay, the semantic element that we are going to create, okay, tells the developer a clear meaning of what you are trying to put it here. Fine. Now, very simple example of it would be, so examples of non-semantic tags like your div, span, okay, p, they do not tell anything about its content. So we have pasted some content inside the div, but it never spoke about what the content was, right? Or is that a main content? Is it an heading? Okay, is it what? Fine, div didn't tell me anything about it. So examples of semantic elements like header, footer, and article clearly define its content. Right? So there are other tags as well. So only not header, footer, and article. Now these, what we are talking about, are HTML5 elements. So here, if I say header, footer, and article, these all are HTML5 elements. They were not present prior to HTML5, right? And they are available only with HTML5 to be used. Now here, when I talk about using this with HTML5, I need to be very sure. Okay, so let's understand that header, footer, article, section, or even for that matter, nav, okay, aside. So there are different parts to it. So we'll talk about all these semantic tags now, and let's see how HTML5 gives us the semantic tags to us. Now, for you to understand, as we were discussing on the example, right, as we talked about, we said in our page, this content that's being shown is marked with div everywhere. That's what ideally used to happen. But now I can have this page being marked with semantic tags so that I know as a developer, even as the browser, that which content goes where. So if at all I talk about marking that, I can do this by saying, let's say this is my header, this is my main page, main content that's going to be there. This is going to be my footer, let's say, and there's going to be some thing which is going to be shown on the right hand side part. Okay? And there may be something which is going to be also shown on the left hand side part, which is the navigation. So you can have an image in here and you can have the link. So how do you do with semantic tags rather than divs? You mark this as a header. So that's a semantic tag. You mark this as, let's say, a nav, which is navigation. You mark this as a footer. Now this is a page footer. We'll talk about footers and headers and other things as well. This may be marked as an aside. Right? So what are these being used for? Now if this is a header tag that has been given to you by HTML, so you have these all present as tags, what I've written in here. Okay, these are all companion tags and you write them with it. Okay. You also have within this header, let's say you have an section where you want multiple items to be present. Now instead of again using divs, so it's not wrong to use it, it's wrong to overuse the div tag. Okay, because we are here to make use of div to a correct manner. Okay, so instead of having things to be overused by div, we can mark the content by using article and section, right? So if I try to make use of it, we just need to understand that you have another items. So let's say if I just go in and specify in this main content, you can even have a section, a container, find being marked with an article. So this can be article, and you can have some smaller parts of it marked by sections. So this can be section. Now semantically, your browser is going to understand, and more on the browser side, your developer is going to understand, okay, if I'm trying to put this as a header, it means this is an header. Fine. If I'm going to put something into a footer, okay, this is the footer control. Fine, this is a footer tag and everything goes inside it's a footer, rather than having a div with ID footer or class footer and things like that. Okay. So semantically, it makes your browser understands, okay, this is how the things are going to go to. But your browser, now these words coming out of my mouth are important. Browser is not going to apply any styling meaning not about the display property, because most of these are display colon block, okay, like the header, nav, footer and things like that. But if you talk about, okay, if I mark something as header, then it should go at the top. If I mark something as nav, it should go on the left hand side. That's not going to happen. It's going to be taken care by the developer by styling these individual elements. So if I mark something with a side, then everything will go on the right hand side. No, that's not what semantic tag do. They just semantically map the content. That's the job of it. Fine. So it's basically for the developer that he knows that, okay, this is my header. So if anyone else comes and reads your code, he will be semantically understanding, okay, this is the content that has gone into an article. So there must be some subsections where the things are going in, right? So let's make use of these tags and understand how do we make use of them. So let's use here, let's say, and yeah, so I'll just be creating semantic tags with HTML5.tm, and instead of just no layout, I'll just rename this as layouting control. Now with the semantic tags, we're going to start off by writing a simple header, right? I'm going to have a header. Now because this is the header tag that HTML5 gives you, and if I'm trying to put a header at the body level, it means this is a page header. So I'm going to have, let's say, HTML5 as an header. So now I can go back and use some links. Now it's not mandatory that header has to have just one item. You can even go back and group it. Fine. So let's come back and even I can go back and have an. Now again, just to before we go on and see, if I right click and say open with live server, you see it's not showing something in bold because I'm just zoomed out because that's maybe why that value is being shown in a. But if I just see it as 100%, HTML5 is not going to be a header. So it means it's not an h1 tag. It is just semantic tag which can contain an h1 tag. Oops. Yeah. So h1 is what this HTML5 can contain. And now if I do this, then HTML5 is shown in a heading. Again, it's not being centered. Fine, it's not something because that's not what it does. Then we may go back and have some links. Now to have links, we have the dedicated section that's called as nav. So nav contains all the links, the anchor tags, maybe if you're having any. So yesterday we talked about links. So let's say this goes back to layouting tags.html. Fine. I'll say, let's say, layouting tags. Now anchor tags, if I just paste, these are not block level. So maybe if I'm going back to http www.google.com, I'm saying go to Google. If you see in just view, they are not block level because you can see the items coming one after another. So they are again inline. So if I just zoom for a better readability, so you can see layouting tags and go to Google is what is being shown. So there is no styling by default. Anything that the anchor tag by default does, find your elements, which is nav, is going to do. So it's not going to put it on the left hand side. It's not going to put something on the top or right hand side. That's just semantically present there. Same is the case with your aside tag. Okay. Now the question is, why do you use aside? Now you use aside for some extra information. Okay. Now it may be any related info that you want to show, right? Or maybe totally unrelated info. It's up to you, right? Or maybe even for advertisement. So it is completely up to you what you want to show inside it. So let's say you've browsed some websites, okay? You have, let's say, book a ticket, or maybe you've gone to booking some ticket onto it, and then you visit MSN, or if you visit something, maybe they are kind of tracking of, okay, this is what the sites you have visited, and they may be showing some different flight tickets with a less value of the price to be charged in. So that's how these aside things can be used for showing in. So it can be used to show some related content to it, or the content can be completely unrelated. So it's up to you what you're trying to make use of in this aside bar. So aside can be used to keep some content aside, fine, and have something which is kind of related. Let's say if you're reading a blog and you want to visit something which is related to that blog, you can have that as well, or completely off or related off topic which is not having any relation with the content blog that you're using. So that's what aside can be used. So how do you write an aside tag? You just use aside, and within aside I would just write in this is used to show related, unrelated, or advertisements as a path. So if I just view this into the browser, here you will not see it's not coming on the right hand side because that's not what semantic tags do. So that's your aside. And then for the main content, okay, where you try to put in, you have section, and within section you can have article. Okay. So you have article. It's not wrong again to have an section contains an article, but that's not what you do. So you say, okay, I'm using an article for the main content, and I may even go back and have a header for an article as well, right? So it's not the fact that you have to use header only at the page level. This can be in a header for an article. I can even go back and not choose to have header into an article, but maybe have a section, and within section have a header. So here I would just say section header. But if I mark something with a header, as we saw previously, it's not going to make that as a header until unless I try to make use of it. Okay? So I need to wrap. Now you'll observe, if I just say h2 and have the section header in here, then it's going to be the section header. Fine. Then I can go back and write some min. Now here, if you want, you can have another div p or any of the things to be used in here as well. Okay, it's absolutely fine if you're wanting to do that. Okay, so let's say main, or have just things be going in here. I can even go back, sorry, and have a footer. So there's the main content footer. So maybe this is the kind of a blog, and you want to know, okay, when this blog was written. Okay, so maybe you want to put a date. Let's say this is 3rd October 2020, and you may want to put the value for it. So this date will be going inside your footer, but it's still not going to have any effect onto it. You can see even the main content goes here, and even the footer, they are shown in the same font, so it's not the fact that it's going to have any effect onto it. And then I can have, after this article, because I'm in the body tag now, I can have the page footer. So I'll say this is page footer, right? And at the rate copyright, and things can go in. So or 2020. So anything that you want to put in as the page footer. So again, it does not come on the side which is on the bottom part of the page. So all of this has to be again styled. Fine. If HTML has to be put in here, if these links have to come on the left hand side, a side has to go on the right hand side, then the section has to be centered here in here. Okay, and then the page footer should come here. Then you are the one who are going to take care of styling it so that the elements are displayed in a manner that you are wanting it. Okay. So when I talk about making use of semantic tags, that's how it's being used. Now these are two things. Now if you have a look at each of these items, like for your h1, so if I'm just going back and saying inspect element, if I just zoom in, so for each of the items, so this is your header, this is your nav, fine, this is your aside, fine, this is your article, this is your footer for the page, and if you see, all of these items are shown into next line of code. So I guess now you will understand that these elements must have a display property as block. So when you make something as display property as block, it comes on the next line. So if you see, you can see if I just select aside, you can see display colon block. If I select nav, that display colon block. Same is the case with your header as well. Fine. So I understand that these tags, these are the semantic tags that HTML5 gives me. And when I'm trying to make use of these tags, the default browser is not going to have any styling, but there is a difference that the browser understands. Let's say, for example, this is an h1 tag that you used. If I'm trying to use an h1 tag inside the section, can you see there is a difference? So your browser understands that this is an h1 tag inside a header that's contained inside a section, right? And here, this h1 is in header which is contained inside your body, right? So as I said, it does not have much of a control over where the item should be shown in, but yes, browser renders it differently because of the hierarchy that it is kind of related to. So here, when I talk about this h1 tag, that's even though you have used h1 inside your header, then that's not going to be showing in the same format what it was for the page heading to be done. So it will look out for making sure that h1 is, even though it's an h1, it's still less than what it was being shown for the page length. Now, so the question is, when I'm trying to make use of some content, like if I'm trying to make use of this content, should I be using layouting controls or should I be using semantic controls? Now with HTML5, as you get these semantic controls, using semantic controls is one of the best choices that you can make it. So you can still make use of divs. I'm not saying divs, p's and span are kind of deprecated, but they should not be overused. They should be used where you want some section to be identified maybe as a different styling, or you want to have some portions to be divided into it, and then inside, so you can have 3 divs, let's say, and within that 3 div tags, okay, you can have your article section header and things being going in, okay, which is not wrong, but from an overusage perspective from div, that's not which is kind of a good thing that you should be overusing your div tags. So we as developers with HTML5 decide that we're going to make use of these semantic tags, and tags are something that HTML5 is promoting for you to make use of. Now we'll be styling this when we'll go back to CSS and CSS3 module, so that you understand that how we can apply some styling to these semantic tags as well. By default, all these semantic tags that HTML5 gives you are having block level elements. Fine, you don't have to worry about it, but it will not by default be understood that if this is an header, then it should go at the top. Okay. Now, to talk more onto this, let's say if I make use of these tags. So what we discussed on here, if I just see the summary of it. So we talked on div, p, and span at first, right? And then we talked about semantic tags. So instead of using divs everywhere, we just had these semantic tags to be used. Let's say if I'm something called as a page header, then it should go inside the header tag. If I'm having a page footer, then it should go inside your footer. Footer can contain these items, like footer can contain span, footer can contain p and other things as well. That's also fine. So header, nav, aside, article, section, fine. These are your tags. Even there is a main tag contained in there. Okay, to specify that this is the main content. You can even have your main as an semantic tag to be present. So let's see the examples and revise of what we did. So in the first example that we did today, we first specified that okay, there is no layouting as such. So if I'm just now putting everything into the body tag, there will be no by default layouting, and for that we went ahead and used the div tag. And div tag is nothing but divisions of the body. So I can have multiple div tags. I can even copy, and you'll see, because it's the block level element, if I just paste it twice, view this into the live server, you just see it's just coming on the left hand. So if now this happens even if the div is having some size. Okay, so let's say if I go back and have a size for this div being specified, and I'll say, let's say height to be as 300 pixels, fine, and or maybe I'll just say height to be 700, and I'll just say width to be let's say 500 pixels. Now, even if I limit the size of it, you will still see the element is not going to come in here. So it's not the fact that because it's spanning the entire width by default, because it's a block level element, that's what in browser it by default will do. But even if I have restricted the height and width of it and there is space, this HTML will not be coming in here. Now, if you want to do that, you need to use CSS properties like float, fine, to come in here, or use the media queries, or let's say kind of use some things like bootstrap grid that you give along. You can use it, or even the flexbox for that matter. So the thing which I want to tell you is, even if you are having multiple div tags and there is still some space to it, it will not allow it to be there on the right hand side in the column format, because that's a block level. So we went ahead and used the style attribute, and we said style attribute is a global attribute which can be used with most of the elements, and they apply stylings to that individual elements. So div, then p. So p is a paragraph. We had different styling for it. We all different styling for span as well, which is basically used from a collection of words perspective. If you want to selectively have some words being there and then have some styling to be there, we can just use span. And then we talked about the semantic tags too. So semantic tags are a better way to lay out your control, okay, depending on how the page is wanting those controls to be layered in, and that's the reason why you should ideally be going back and making the semantic tags with it. So I would be having this demo ready. You'll be having the link in the description. Fine. So you'll have all these links and the demo so that you can download and try it out at yourself, make some changes, and you may try creating some layouting control. Okay, layouting things for the header, footer, and the main section. Have some content and try to imitate that content. That can be considered as an hands-on for you to practice. So that's what we covered in today's session. We talked about the layouting tags. We talked about the div, p, and span. We also talked about the semantic tags that HTML5 gives you. So hopefully you must have enjoyed this session, and we are going to cover more on the tags. Okay, like we're going to cover tables and other things as we move ahead. We'll also talk about HTML5 features, input types with forms and all. That's going to come as the sessions progress. So thank you all for being patient, and we see you tomorrow at 5:30. Thank you.